Generation Iron 2. Coming soon.
I'm often asked, what did the bodybuilders of yesteryear, for example, in the era of Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's when I actually competed myself around that time, what did the bodybuilders back then use for fat burning purposes? In other words, today you have a plethora of these so-called fat burning supplements. There's dozens of them. A lot of them are based on herbs and all this and that. Back then, I can tell you right now, we didn't have this wide choice of so-called fat burners. We were very limited. I can tell you that probably the most popular, if you want to call it fat burner supplement, it was under the general term of lipotropics, and it usually consisted of two nutrients, choline and inositol. These would be combined, and they were thought to very popular with the bodybuilders in the 60s and 70s. Everybody used choline and inositol. Lecithin is actually a form of choline. It's called phosphatidylcholine is the actual chemical name. So some bodybuilders use this supplement called lecithin. And this was all thought to be fat burners. In fact, choline was never actually a fat burner. And I'll tell you how the confusion arose is because choline works by contributing what they call methyl donors. Without getting into complex chemistry, let's put it this way. Methyl donors are needed for the liver to process fat properly. In the absence of methyl donors like choline, fat can accumulate in the liver, leading to a condition called fatty liver. Coincidentally, even though fatty liver, back then, it was usually associated with alcoholism. In other words, alcoholics tended to build up fat in their liver for reasons that are too complex to get into in this video. But back then, fatty liver usually appeared only in alcoholics. However, today, fatty liver is epidemic. They estimate that as many as 50 million Americans actually have what they call non-alcoholic fatty liver. This is very bad because fatty liver is the first stage of liver failure. It's followed by fibrosis or cirrhosis of the liver, which can lead to liver cancer or complete liver failure. So it's very serious. And strangely enough, a lot of researchers suggest that one of the reasons why fatty liver is so epidemic today is because people are consuming less choline. Now, choline was discovered way back in 1864, but it wasn't really considered an essential nutrient until 1998, because researchers thought you could make, the body could produce enough of it by synthesizing choline from other amino acids like serine. However, as research progressed, it became evident that the body could not really produce sufficient amounts of choline to meet the needs, and you had to get the suggested amount of choline, which is 550 milligrams a day for adults. You'd have to rely on a food source. Good food sources are liver, and for example, one of the best food sources of choline is egg yolk. Each egg yolk contains 113 milligrams of choline. So if you eat just 5 egg yolks, you already have your daily requirement of choline. Of course, a lot of bodybuilders throw away the egg yolks and they only eat the white. And when you do that, you're throwing away the choline too, so you're not getting any choline. The amount of choline usually added to supplements like meal replacements and other supplements is minuscule. It doesn't really add up to much choline. So, but then again, let me get back to it. Why would choline be considered a fat burner? Again, because of this effect of contributing methyl donors, it helps the liver get rid of fat, and it's also needed to produce proteins in the liver that carry fat in the blood. They're called lipoproteins. You might have heard of high-density lipoprotein, HDL, LDL. Well, methyl donors are involved, like choline, are involved in the synthesis in the liver of these fat carriers in the blood, and this is where the confusion probably arose, where people believed that choline was a fat burner. because it helps to kind of transport fat, but it's not really involved in the oxidation of fat. In more recent years, oh, by the way, I'm not really sure why inositol was included as a lipotrophic or fat-burning supplement back then in the 60s and 70s, because usually if you had supplements containing choline and inositol, I just explained the rationale behind choline. I never really figured out the rationale behind inositol, because there's really no relationship between inositol and any type of fat mobilization or oxidation. I really wasn't sure, and to this day I'm still not sure why inositol was thrown in there. But I do know that most of the bodybuilders back then before contests would take this choline and inositol supplements. Lately, there's been let's go back to the research about choline. Does choline help exercise sports at all? Well, it turns out that unless you're involved in extended activity, let's say lasting 2 hours, like if you're involved in, let's say, marathon running or very, very extended workouts, in those cases, your muscles could become depleted of choline, and taking a choline supplement or eating egg yolks or consuming foods that are higher in choline probably would help. But in most circumstances, you're probably getting enough choline if you eat those foods. Like if you eat egg yolks and if you eat normal foods like liver and stuff like that, you probably don't really need to take any choline supplement at all, and it will not really provide any ergogenic effects. But one thing to keep in mind, though, is that choline forms the basis of another substance called acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter that acts both in the brain and in the muscles. In the muscles, it works at the level of what they call the myoneural junction. To make things simple, what it does, it transmits neural messages from the brain to the muscles, allowing the muscle to contract. So acetylcholine is very important for muscle contraction. And of course, the raw material for acetylcholine is choline. But as I say, it's you kind of like really have to be on a very stringent diet to become deficient in choline. And more recently, there's been a kind of controversy about choline, because a couple of researchers in recent years came out with some studies showing that your intestinal bacteria, what's known as the microbiome, certain types of bacteria called Provotella bacteria, they tend to take certain nutrients like choline and carnitine, and they convert it into a substance called trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO. Now, the significance of this is that TMAO, according to these studies, has a close relationship with causing heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure. In other words, it's bad stuff. Now, I covered TMO. I covered this controversy in depth in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I also, in those articles, I also provided some ways of neutralizing this effect. In other words, protecting you from TMO, because if you're eating high protein foods, you are going to be consuming carnitine and choline. And these researchers actually suggested that, to prevent heart attacks and strokes, people should cut out all foods that contain, certainly not take any supplements of choline or carnitine, but they also suggested that you should cut out all foods containing choline or carnitine, which would mean most of your high protein foods, including meat and eggs. And by the way, the food that contains the highest amounts of TMO naturally is seafood, which contains 53 times more TMAO than does meat. And these articles didn't even mention seafood. They only discussed meat as containing choline and carnitine, causing cardiovascular disease. But as I said in my newsletter, I wrote about anecdotes to this TMAO problem. But suffice to say that, it's kind of up in the air right now. I mean, some of the people like the Mayo Clinic, there's some pretty important medical experts still insist that TMO is a big factor in causing heart attacks and strokes, and that would mean that consuming carnitine and choline is dangerous. But on the other hand, look at the, common sense dictates there's a little something wrong with their hypothesis when you consider that eating fish or seafood according to the studies, tends to prevent cardiovascular disease, likely related to its rich content of omega-3 fats. But on the other hand, seafood does contain, it's loaded with TMAO. So if TMAO was causing heart disease, people eating fish should be dropping dead left and right from heart attacks and strokes. Same with eggs. I just wrote a huge article about the science of egg nutrition in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. And in that article, I pointed out that, if anything, the studies show that eating eggs not only does not cause heart attacks or strokes, it actually tends to prevent them by producing types of lipoproteins that are protective rather than pathogenic. So, I mean, again, if these scientists were correct about TMAO, eating any kind of fish or eating eggs, you should all be dropping dead of heart attacks and strokes, and it's just not happening. So clearly there's something wrong with those theories. So that's basically it for, just wanted to explain, if you might have heard about choline. Choline, if you were doing counter supplements, it's good to take. Actually, I use a form of choline myself. I don't use it for any fat burning purposes. I use it because I use it to increase the production of acetylcholine in the brain. Acetylcholine, as I say, it's a neurotransmitter in the brain, and it's most active in the areas of the brain related to that are related to memory and intelligence. So you can say that I use this form of choline as a type of kind of smart nutrient. I don't take too much of it. Coincidentally, some studies have shown that this particular form of choline can also stimulate growth hormone, but I would not count on it as a growth hormone stimulator for reasons that are too complex to get into in this video. So that's about it for choline. It's actually pretty good stuff. I wouldn't worry about it. And by the way, inositol, for those of you who have, let's say, insomnia, taking fairly large amounts of inositol is a fairly effective treatment for insomnia. If you take about 8 to 10 grams of inositol, best way to take it is in powder form. If you take this about an hour before you go to sleep, it will help you sleep because it works with certain, let's say, neurotransmitters in the brain, one called GABA, which is involved in the sleep process. So I just thought I'd throw that in. If you want in-depth information on nutrition, supplements, anti-aging research, fat loss techniques, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. It's all truth. There's no BS. It's all evidence-based. There's no ads. I'm not trying to sell you anything but information. There's nothing like it anywhere. You won't find this information anywhere on the web, on blogs, or in magazines. I'm incorporating over 50 years of study and empirical knowledge into this newsletter. It could save you a lot of money on supplements. It can help you with your training. You'll avoid making some of the mistakes that I and others made over the years. So subscribe today. Again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. And also, if you want the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. They have every kind of breed, and these dogs are terrific. They're not much trouble at all. They're great companions. I don't know what I do without my dogs, frankly. Every time I get depressed or I run into crazy people and I get pissed off, my dogs always manage to cheer me up. So adopt a dog, save a life today. Thank you for listening.